Today's spine-chilling video will be exploring the dark side of human nature. Get ready to be terrified by the Unsettling Lady.
Claire, my father's friend, was subletting her 2-bedroom flat when I moved out. She promised to give me a good deal. However, I had to share it with an elderly lady she discovered. I understood her financial constraints. The woman was introduced to me by Claire the day I moved in. Anna was her name. She was around 60 years old. It felt strange knowing I'd be sharing a room with someone who resembled my grandmother. Claire had already furnished the flat because she was subletting it. All I had to do was bring my own bed and dress her. The strangeness began on the second night. I was watching TV in the living room when Anna's head poked out from behind the wall into the hallway, and she locked her gaze on me. She began making these strange, faint noises. "Anna, are you all right?" I inquired. She groaned and walked back into the corridor. I immediately called Claire and asked if there was anything wrong with Anna. Claire claimed there was nothing wrong with her, despite the fact that she had only met her a week before. She was surprised when I told her what Claire had just done. Claire was cooking eggs in the kitchen the next day when I happened to walk in. She said good morning, and I asked if she was okay the night before. She seemed perplexed by what I was saying, so I mentioned how she was staring at me and making those noises. She claimed she had no memory of it. All I could think of was some kind of psychotic breakdown. Normal, unnecessary fluff is skipped over. I was in bed, working on my laptop with the light turned off. My bedroom door was wrapped on. I muted my laptop and heard Anna's moaning and groaning from the night before. To be honest, I was hesitant to go out there, but this confirmed that something was definitely wrong with this woman. She continued to knock. The door was unlocked, but it wouldn't stop. I figured she'd come in if something was seriously wrong. I swear the knocking and moaning lasted a full minute before I heard her walk away. These little episodes of hers seemed to happen only at night. I almost wished I could lock the door because it was creepy. But there was no lock on the door. But she had left, so it was safe to sleep now. I expected to wake up around 9 a.m., but it was pitch black. I looked at my watch and saw that it was 1:30 a.m. What woke me up became clear when there was a creak in the room's floor. In the dim light, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of my bed. "Becky," I explained. I could hear the familiar groaning sounds once more. I turned on the lamp beside my bed. And there she was, this old woman with disheveled hair, looking like a half-awake psycho. But the large knife in her hand was the first thing I noticed. I screamed horrifyingly as I curled up in the corner of my bed, expecting her to attack or do something, but all she did was make strange noises. She then exited the room. I dashed to the door and blocked it with the dresser. I tried calling Claire, but she was clearly sleeping. I had to survive the night, and it was a long 6 hours before the sun came up. I called Claire at 8 o'clock and explained everything, then told her she needed to evict Anna right away. She couldn't believe it, but she apologized and promised to come over that day. Claire arrived to speak with Anna. She couldn't just evict her without giving her notice, and the eviction process takes months. So Claire advised me to leave the flat and find another place to live while she dealt with Anna. Anna apologized and stated that she had no recollection of any of this. After doing some research, Claire and I determined Anna had a severe case of sundowning syndrome, which causes people to become confused or aggressive late in the day when the sun sets. It's terrifying to think that, in whatever confused state of mind she was in, she had planned to come into my room and stabbing me for whatever reason.
Continue watching Is He Really the Landlord and uncover the shocking truth behind this mysterious figure.
When I was 22, I got a job in New York City while still living in New Jersey. However, I couldn't possibly make that commute every day, so I had to relocate. The only problem is that I don't have a lot of money yet. So when I saw an ad on Craigslist for an available bedroom in a Hell's Kitchen flat for a very low price, I jumped at it. The next day, I took a ride to the city to see the flat, and the landlord gave me a quick tour of the place. The landlord himself appeared to be a little socially awkward, but that didn't really matter. The location did have a catch. I'd be sharing a room. The landlord described him as a very quiet person, which he thought was a good thing. My roommate's name is Jack. The landlord knocked on Jack's door, inviting him out to say hello. Jack didn't even respond. The landlord speculated that he might be sleeping. So we moved on to the living room to talk, and I mentioned that I was interested in renting. I signed an application, and the landlord called the next day to offer me the room. So I moved in the following week. My father assisted me in moving all of my belongings into my small room. Something odd was that during all of this commotion, this Jack character never came out to say hello. He was undeniably at home. We could hear him moving about in his room. I quickly realized that he wasn't going to be friendly in the least. My father left after we finished unloading the van, leaving me alone. I had officially moved out. I sat down in bed and began watching Netflix on my laptop. Then I heard Jack's room door open and close. This seemed like a good opportunity to say hello. It was his first time out of the house. I rolled out of bed, but before I could even get to my bedroom door, the apartment's front door slammed shut. When I went outside to the living room, no one was there. I wasn't sure what the deal was with this Jack guy, but he had to know we'd have to meet at some point. I returned to my room, ate a bowl of ramen, and fell asleep. When I heard the front door of the flat close again, I awoke. Then there were footsteps. The creaky wood floor creaked its way to the outside of my door, then stopped. I sat up and examined the crack beneath the door. Footprints could be seen through the light seeping in under the door. Why was he acting like a jerk outside? Of course, I remained silent. I just stood there waiting for him to leave. I hadn't locked my door, and I was terrified of him entering my room. Fortunately, he walked away from my door and back to his room, and I heard him close his door. I tried to sleep, but all I could hear were thumps coming from his room all night. I had no idea what he could be up to. I wanted to go knock on his door and tell him to calm down, but I hadn't even met him yet, so I had to deal with it. I eventually fell asleep, and when I awoke in the morning, it appeared that Jack had already left. Perhaps at work. I had no idea at the time. I spent the majority of that day shopping for groceries and other necessities for my flat. When I got home, I put all of my bags on the couch in the living room to rest. I cooked dinner and sat on the couch to watch Netflix. Throughout this time, Jack never returned home. I ran to the nearby 7-Eleven for toothpaste, and when I returned, I noticed Jack's door was open and the light was on. So I figured now was the time to introduce myself. I went to his door, lightly knocked twice, and then pushed the door open. What I discovered inside was shocking. Or perhaps what I didn't find in there. The room was completely devoid of people. There was no furniture except for a single chair in the corner of the room. A chair like you'd find in a high school classroom. My heart started racing and I began to shake. I shut the door and turned off the light in that room. Could this Jack have been in the process of leaving? I went to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed where I got a severe headache. I took out my phone and dialed the landlord's number to find out what was going on. I put the phone to my ear after dialing his number and heard a loud ringing sound coming from my closet. My already racing heart felt like it was now in my stomach. The phone rang twice before going to voicemail. I got out of bed and was about to open the wardrobe when I realized that the phone had rung twice, which meant he had his phone and had declined the call. I had the sick realization that the landlord was almost certainly in my wardrobe and there had never been a Jack. I dashed to the toilet, locked myself in, and dialed 911. They arrived quickly and searched the entire apartment with me. Sure enough, the landlord was hiding under my bed. I tried filing trespassing charges to get out of the lease, but it turned out there was no lease at all. This guy wasn't even a landlord. He didn't even own the place. I didn't understand the rest of the story, such as how he obtained the keys in the first place. My father came the next day to help me move all of my belongings back home. I found another flat the following week, and going through the entire moving process again was a huge hassle. I could tell right away that the so-called landlord was untrustworthy. But who could have predicted the events that were about to unfold?
Dare to explore the mind of a murderer. Watch Is He a Serial Killer and find out if you can handle it.
On Zillow, there was an ad for a shared flat near the chicken farm where I worked. I chose to live there because it was convenient and already furnished. I just dropped off my clothes and a mini dresser, and I already had a bed in the spare room to sleep in. The man who was renting me the room was elderly. His name was Mike, and he was about 70 years old. It was a non-contractual agreement, which meant I pay him weekly. But he was still essentially a roommate. Everything in the house was old-fashioned because he was. I don't come from a wealthy family, so believe me when I say this was a steal for me. After a long day at work, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep like a baby one night. But I was startled awake when I heard the bedroom door open. The old man, Mike, stood in the doorway as light poured into the room from the hallway. "Stay out of the basement," he said in a deep, hoarse voice, his hand on the doorknob. He stated that he was aware that I had gone down there. I defended myself and assured him that I hadn't, because I hadn't. I heard him walk downstairs after he shut the door. This guy must be unstable or something, I thought as I sat there. I was off work the next day, and Mike probably took his old gelato down the road to the store, leaving me alone to stare at the basement door, which I knew was the basement door because I had seen him go down there before. I went to open it just to take a look downstairs, but it was obviously pitch black. I would never have felt compelled to go down there if it hadn't been for his strange remark about not going down there. But I figured he wouldn't be home for a while, so I continued down, found the light switch at the bottom, stepped for some reason, and it was mostly a normal basement so far, except for a door in the corner. Behind that door was something unimaginable. The door was difficult to open because there was some sort of rubber concealer under it, I'm guessing to keep that horrible smell out of the rest of the basement and house. Blood stains on the concrete floor, black bags stacked in the corner of the room, stretching long enough to be carrying bodies or body parts, and the smell of rotting life. I had to stop myself from puking right there. I noticed a camera hung in the top right corner of the room, aimed down at some workbench. I hurried out of there, went up to the spare bedroom, packed all of my clothes in a garbage bag, and heard the front door slam shut downstairs. I kept my cool and greeted him from the upstairs hallway. He didn't respond. I heard him open the basement door and stomp downstairs, which I took as my cue to sprint to my car. I got there and drove away without looking back. I drove 15 miles back to my brother's farm and showed him the picture. He called me an idiot for not calling the sheriff sooner, so I dialed 911 and told them to bring a search warrant to Mike's address and check the basement before he cleared it out. When I came across it, I made it clear that I was simply his temporary flatmate or tenant living with him, and a few hours later, someone from the sheriff's department came to my brother's farm asking for my ID and some other information. I complied, and they informed me that Mike had been arrested. He was in the process of clearing any evidence from his basement, but he wasn't quick enough. The deputies didn't go into much detail about what they found in those bags or anything else, but I don't believe they were allowed to. They thanked me and left, and my brother let me stay with him for a few weeks until I was ready to return to the real world and find another flat.
Ever had a roommate from hell? Check out the Obnoxious Flatmate and see how this terrifying tale unfolds.
I'm not sure how many of you went to college, but if you did, you probably remember that feeling of walking into your dorm for the first time and meeting your flatmate, the person you're supposed to be friends with for the next 4 years. I certainly do. I walked into my dorm for the first time, and there was my roommate, who had fair skin, black hair, glasses, and a slightly feminine tone in his voice. Nothing wrong with any of that, but he just struck me as the gaming type, which was not someone with whom I was going to easily vibe. I was put off from the moment I shook his hand and he gave me a dead fish handshake. I'll call him Kevin for the sake of this story. I left the room to say hello to the other kids on the floor and meet as many people as possible. I clicked with some of the other kids more quickly than I did with Kevin, but that first night was spent unpacking and hanging out in the room, so I did try to get to know Kevin a little bit. He wasn't mean, it was just that he didn't seem to know how to converse. I'd ask him questions about himself, and he'd give me one-word answers or responses that barely made sense. He even went to bed early, turning off his lamp at 10 p.m., which I found odd because no one had classes the next day, so I put on headphones and watched videos on my phone until around 12 a.m. Then I went to bed. The next morning, a few of the guys on my floor and I went to the dining hall together, and when I returned to my room, my duffel bag had moved. I looked at Kevin, who was sitting on his bed. Then I went to go through my bag to see if anything was missing. I couldn't find anything, but my bag just seemed lighter. I accused Kevin of going through my bag, and he denied it angrily. But what could I do? I didn't have any cameras in the room, so I couldn't prove it. The next night, I tried inviting Kevin out with me and a couple of the other kids from the floor, but he refused, claiming he needed to finish his work as soon as possible. So I went out, and when I returned, Kevin was fast asleep. It was late, so I just went straight to bed as well. It began to rain pretty heavily outside, and a storm was forecast. I awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of thunder crashing. I was too comfortable and lazy to roll over and look outside, but even with my eyes closed, I could see the constant flashing of lightning, which actually helped put me back to sleep. I woke up the next morning to find my backpack open and moving. Instead of accusing Kevin, I decided to stay up that night and wait and listen to what he was doing. So, after a long, rainy day, night arrived, as did the time for me to hit the hay. I spent a long time on my phone listening to the rain outside the window before flipping on my side and pretending to sleep for a long time. And then I noticed the flashes again, 2 or 3 times. I turned to my other side and saw Kevin sitting upright in his bed, only catching a glimpse of him quickly putting down his arms as I flipped over. Suddenly, all those flashes made sense. It wasn't lightning, it was him photographing me. I pretended to be dumb and asked, "What are you doing?" He stuttered and said he couldn't sleep, and the next day I told the other kids on the floor about it, as well as how strange Kevin was in general. They suggested I request a room change, and I agreed. When I returned to the room, Kevin was gone for the first time in a long time. I couldn't believe it. His laptop was also on his bed, with the lid cracked open. I couldn't help myself. I was too curious. I opened the laptop and found myself on Kevin's desktop, which was littered with folders, programs, and images. It was the messiest desktop I'd ever seen. I began opening random pictures on his desktop. The majority of them were strange, but then I got to the disturbing ones, pictures of me. When I opened one of them, I realized it was a picture of me in bed, taken with an iPhone with a flash, and he had saved all of the pictures he'd taken of me on his computer. He even had pictures of my duffel bag on the inside of my backpack. I took a video of the laptop screen, then deleted every picture I could find on his computer and closed his laptop before going straight to the dorm life hall and showing them the video. I immediately requested a new housemate. I'm not sure how the school disciplined Kevin, but the next day I was going to move into a new room across campus. However, on my final night with Kevin, I couldn't sleep at all. I heard the springs under his mattress kinking as he got out of bed at some strange hour of the night, then silence. Silence until I heard a short, quiet exhale come from right above my bed. I just knew it, but I was too afraid to turn around. My new flatmate was a breath of fresh air, a normal guy. It's a little creepy knowing Kevin still has all those pictures of me sleeping on his phone. I'm not sure what his goal was with those photos. I'm not sure why he stood over my bed like that the last night I was there, or why he went through my bags. The kid was a psychotic creep, and I'm glad I got away from him.
Thank you for watching this horrifying tale on Terrifying Tales TV. If you enjoy being scared out of your wits, don't forget to subscribe. Sleep tight and remember, the terror never ends.